A clash out in the open sea is shaking up the Caribbean. Reports say an American ship went head-to-head with a Venezuelan vessel. Over the last 15 days, the crystal clear waters of the Caribbean have turned into the stage for a military operation straight out of an action movie. Boats exploding at sea, fishermen held for hours, and the whole world watching a rising tension that could reshape the entire geopolitics of the region. U.S. President Donald Trump personally announced these actions, sparking a diplomatic crisis that's echoing across Latin America. According to Washington, suspicious boats were destroyed and dozens of people died. Meanwhile, Caracas is denouncing aggression and violation of sovereignty. But let's break down what's really stirring up the Caribbean waters, and how this whole mess could drag the Americas, the continent known for peace among nations, right into a conflict with global proportions. To really get what's going on, we need a mental map of the Caribbean region. Picture a stretch of ocean connecting Venezuela, passing through the small Caribbean islands, and reaching the U.S. coast. This route has turned into one of the main highways of the global drug trade, moving tons of cocaine from South America straight to U.S. markets. The American government decided to hit that flow directly, but not just by intercepting the drugs. They're literally blowing up the suspected boats right in the middle of the ocean. This strategy marks a radical shift in the war on drugs, moving from police operations to deadly military actions in international waters. On the Venezuelan side, Nicolas Maduro's government is calling these actions acts of aggression and violations of national sovereignty. They argue innocent civilians are being killed, and that the American operations break international treaties governing the region. The first American military operation went down in early September 2025. According to Trump, the strike killed 11 people on a vessel allegedly carrying drugs and operated by the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. Videos released by the U.S. government show a speedboat with 4 outboard motors being hit by missiles, catching fire and sinking fast. The footage is intense, debris floating, thick black smoke rising from the sea, and no sign of survivors. The second strike on Monday, September 15, 2025, revealed even more about the new U.S. military strategy. Trump personally announced on his social network Truth Social that U.S. forces carried out a second kinetic strike against what he called extraordinarily violent drug trafficking cartels and narco-terrorists. The president posted a video labeled Unclassified, showing a vessel rocking on the sea before bursting into an orange fireball. According to the announcement, 3 male terrorists were killed in the attack while transporting illegal narcotics from Venezuela to the United States in international waters. Trump said the operation left large bags of cocaine and fentanyl floating across the ocean, showing visual proof of the alleged drug cargo. He described the victims as confirmed Venezuelan narco-terrorists and emphasized that no American military personnel were harmed. Between those 2 deadly strikes, something else happened that could be even more significant diplomatically. A Venezuelan fishing boat called Carmen Rosa was boarded by 18 armed U.S. troops from the destroyer USS Jason Dunham, who stayed on the boat for 8 hours. The 9 Venezuelan fishermen were detained the whole time before finally being released. Moves like this are fueling the tensions, and countries all over the world are now keeping a close eye on the operation. The exact location of these events is key to understanding the legal fallout. The U.S. claims the operations happened in international Caribbean waters, an area that technically doesn't belong to any specific country. But things get complicated when you consider exclusive economic zones, EEZs, of the nations in the region. Venezuela insists that at least the boarding of the fishing boat happened inside its EEZ, making the U.S. action a direct violation of Venezuelan sovereignty. This distinction isn't just a technicality. It determines whether the American actions are legal under international law or flat-out acts of aggression. The Caribbean also has a unique feature that adds another layer of complexity. The region is covered by the Treaty of Tlatelolco, established in 1967, which created a nuclear-free zone across Latin America and the Caribbean. The treaty covers all 33 countries in the region and bans the development, storage, or use of nuclear weapons. While the Tlatelolco Treaty doesn't block conventional anti-drug operations, it does create a special political sensitivity in the region. Caribbean and Latin American countries often invoke the treaty as a symbol of their preference for peaceful, non-military solutions to regional conflicts. What we're seeing in the Caribbean might be the biggest U.S. military operation there in decades. The American buildup officially started in late August 2025, but the full scale of the operation only became clear in recent weeks. The U.S. military force now deployed to the region is massive, both in numbers and capability. Over 4,000 Marines and sailors have been sent to the waters around Latin America and the Caribbean, showing off a dramatic show of force that gives the president a wide range of military options. The naval fleet includes 3 destroyers, 2 landing ships, 1 amphibious assault ship, a cruiser, and a littoral combat ship, all already in the region or on the way. On top of that, 8 combat ships, several Navy P, 8 surveillance planes, and an attack submarine are part of the mission. Each destroyer carries Coast Guard detachments and law enforcement personnel, signaling a hybrid military police operation. Ships specifically identified in the operation include the USS Lake Erie and USS Newport News, which joined the already mentioned USS Jason Dunham. The USS Lake Erie was recently spotted crossing the Panama Canal, showing the complex logistics needed to keep such a force active in the region. The air component is just as significant. F-35 fighters have been deployed to Puerto Rico, providing advanced airstrike capabilities near the operation theater. This is a major escalation, since F-35s are the most advanced military tech available for strike missions. What makes this buildup even more concerning is the legal foundation behind it. Trump secretly signed an order authorizing the military to take action against Latin American drug cartels and other criminal groups. The order gives the Pentagon the power to launch military operations at sea and on foreign soil against cartels that the Trump administration has labeled as terrorist organizations. This presidential directive marks a fundamental shift in America's anti-drug strategy. Traditionally, anti-narcotics efforts were based on international cooperation, seizures, and prosecutions. Now, we're seeing an approach that authorizes deadly military force against suspects in international waters, and possibly even on foreign territory. The fallout of this escalation goes way beyond the Caribbean. Sources say Trump will be presented with a ready-made menu of strike options, including possible targets like high-profile cartel hubs, leadership hideouts, or drug production facilities flagged by U.S. intelligence. The Trump administration is weighing plans to use military force against Mexican drug cartels, which would be a dramatic escalation of U.S. involvement in Latin America. 3 military sources confirmed that an ultra-secret planning order issued in late spring told U.S. Northern Command, NORTHCOM, to prep deadly strikes against cartel targets inside Mexico. This U.S. military buildup isn't happening in a vacuum. In response to the naval presence in the Caribbean, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro deployed ships and drones to the coast, while Colombia and Venezuela moved troops to their shared border in declared anti-drug operations. The regional reaction shows that other countries are bracing for an even bigger escalation. Mexico has already rejected any U.S. military presence on its soil, with President Claudia Sheinbaum declaring, "The United States will not come into Mexico with troops. We cooperate, we coordinate, but there will be no invasion." This military operation is about more than just fighting drugs. Analysts see the buildup as a high-risk strategy to pressure Nicolas Maduro, test Russia, China, and Iran, and reaffirm U.S. dominance in the Western Hemisphere. The presence of an attack submarine in the operation, in particular, signals capabilities far beyond just intercepting drug boats. The timing of this operation, happening while global tensions rise with Venezuela's allies like Russia and China, adds a complex geopolitical layer. Showing force in America's own backyard may be as much about cartels as it is about sending a message to rival powers about U.S. willingness and ability to project military power. Nicolas Maduro's government reacted with outrage to the U.S. operations. Venezuelan Foreign Minister Yvonne Gil called the actions illegal and hostile, and said the country is seeking international support to condemn what it sees as acts of aggression. Venezuela is trying to internationalize the conflict, seeking backing from organizations like the OAS, the Organization of American States, and the UN. Caracas argues that the U.S. actions break fundamental principles of international law, including national sovereignty and due process. There's also a major humanitarian side to this crisis. The fishermen held for 8 hours reported harsh conditions during the military boarding. Even though they were released unharmed physically, the psychological and economic impact hit not just the 9 crew members, but also their families and fishing community. On the American side, serious legal questions are popping up about presidential powers. Critics are asking whether the president has constitutional authority to order deadly strikes on suspects in international waters without Congress's approval. This isn't a declared war zone, raising doubts about the legal grounds for using lethal military force. International law experts point out that while countries can chase criminals in international waters, the use of deadly force has to meet strict standards of proportionality and necessity. Blowing up entire vessels with everyone on board may cross those limits, especially if there was no attempt to capture or if civilians were present. One of the most controversial parts of these operations is the lack of transparency about the evidence behind the strikes. The U.S. government has only released short clips of boats being destroyed, but hasn't provided details about the intelligence that led to the attacks or the identities of the victims. Human rights groups and independent journalists are demanding more answers. What kind of intelligence flagged these vessels as suspicious? Were drugs actually found in the wreckage? Were there innocent civilians on board? What were the exact coordinates of the strikes? The absence of clear answers is fueling speculation and conspiracy theories across the region. Some critics suggest the strikes may have been based on bad intelligence, or that innocent people may have been killed. The reaction from Caribbean and Latin American countries has been one of concern and caution. Many governments are in a tricky spot. They need to maintain diplomatic ties with the U.S., but can't ignore the sovereignty and human rights issues raised by American actions. Countries like Colombia and Brazil, which work closely with the U.S. on drug enforcement, have privately expressed concern about the military escalation, though they've avoided direct public criticism. Small island nations in the Caribbean are especially nervous, since their territorial waters sit close to where the U.S. is operating. International organizations, including the UN and OAS, are under pressure to investigate the events and set clearer rules for military operations in international Caribbean waters. From a strategic angle, the real question is whether these military ops will actually work. Blowing up a few boats might disrupt certain routes temporarily, but criminal organizations are notoriously adaptable. Drug trade experts warn that aggressive military ops could backfire. Cartels might respond by creating stealthier routes, using smaller, harder-to-spot vessels, or even doubling down on land routes through Mexico. There's also the risk that naval strikes will push cartels to militarize their operations even more. If traffickers start seeing U.S. forces as enemy combatants instead of law enforcement, they could arm their boats heavily or even attack U.S. Navy ships. The next few weeks will be key in figuring out whether this military escalation becomes the new normal in the Caribbean or whether diplomacy pulls things back. Trump has already hinted at more operations, possibly expanding to land targets, which could completely reshape the region's security dynamics. Several scenarios are possible. Continued U.S. strikes could turn into an undeclared war against criminal groups in the region. International diplomatic pressure could force Washington to dial things down. Or accidental civilian casualties could spark a humanitarian crisis that forces a change in strategy. This Caribbean situation shows a core tension in modern geopolitics. How far can a superpower go in the name of national security before it tramples on other countries' sovereign rights? The U.S. says it's protecting its citizens from the scourge of drugs, Venezuela, and its allies say they're victims of military aggression disguised as anti-drug ops. The truth, like always in geopolitics, is probably somewhere in the middle. It's undeniable that the Caribbean is a key drug smuggling route that causes massive damage in the U.S. It's also undeniable that military strikes near sovereign nations, especially when they cause deaths, create dangerous regional tensions. What we're seeing in the Caribbean isn't just an anti-drug operation, it's potentially the birth of a brand new U.S. military doctrine for the region. If these operations keep going and expand, they could permanently redefine U.S. Latin America relations, turning the Caribbean from a tropical paradise into a militarized zone. The situation is evolving fast, with new revelations popping up every day. What started as anti-drug ops may be morphing into a wider regional conflict, with consequences stretching far beyond the war on drugs. For the millions of people living in the Caribbean region, this escalation means uncertainty about the future, worries about safety, and doubts about whether their territorial waters will stay under their own sovereignty. The world is watching closely to see if this tension gets solved through diplomacy or keeps spiraling toward a much bigger regional conflict.